Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, this breakout session on challenging narratives across the sectors of journalism, art, and activism. My name is Romy Heijmans, and I'll be your moderator for this session. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that this is a safe and a respectful space, so please keep in mind that everyone here, we're going to ask you some questions in the audience as well. You're also able to ask everyone at the table questions. But keep in mind that we keep it respectful. Also, some of the topics that we're going to be talking about are topics that can be a bit triggering. Also, the visual content could be a little bit triggering. So put your care first, put care for others first. There's a care team present here as well. If you need support, you can go to the organizing organization. It's called Here to Support. Lisa Saris or Eunice de Assis from Migrante. So during the breakout session, we will be discussing the topic of solidarity across these different sectors that I just mentioned, but also across fields, across methods, and across different people. And the idea is that we discuss and that we kind of explore how we can not let the difference in sectors, for instance, come between us, but amplify the voices within them. Here at the table are the people that we're going to do that with. I'm going to introduce them to you in a second, and they're all going to, except for you, Bea, I'm going to explain your position in a little bit, and they're all going to present their projects to you, after which you get the opportunity to ask some questions about it, one or two. Then after the presentations, we're going to get to a roundtable talk in which you're also very welcome to ask questions. Just raise your hand if you have one, and then someone with a microphone will come your way. Please wait until they're there, because otherwise the people in the live stream won't be able to hear the question, because, you know. I'd like to give the word to Dana Olarescu. Hi, welcome. Can I actually get an applause for all the people at the table? Thank you. Welcome. Very happy that you're here. You flew in from London this morning.
I did.
Yeah.
By train, actually. It was a bit better.
Sorry.
It was a bit better than flying.
It's a lot better, yeah. You came in from London. You're a little bit tired, but you're happy to be here, you said before.
The adrenaline is kicking in.
Good. And we're going to hear from you about your work as a socially engaged artist. Where you kind of focus on two main topics, which is minority exclusion and environmental justice. And you developed a toolkit in Palermo recently, and you're going to show us a little bit of that.
I will. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and so nice to kind of see you all and be able to talk about this. I'll do a very, very short introduction on who I am, and then I'll talk about the toolkit and how it was developed. So I'm a socially engaged artist. I'm Romanian born, but I live in London. And over the years, I guess I normally start by saying I don't make objects. I don't make pretty objects. I work with people, and we make things together, and we sort of strive for social change. And I'm really interested in what happens when people organize, when they come into groups and they say, we want to work on this. And that's kind of the beauty of the artwork, I think, and trying to use art to sort of mobilize. And so there have been many, many occasions when I've worked with groups where I thought I'm finding out really interesting things that I think I really need a journalist. I need an investigative journalist to come in and kind of do a bit more digging. So it was incredibly helpful when back last November, I think, an organization called Beyond the Now, based in Ireland, invited me to join a collaborative incubator, which really focused on reframing migration in European media. And so we had a couple of Zoom sessions first, where you had socially engaged artists, investigative journalists, and digital activists who came in and talked about their practices, trying to find solidarity between these sectors. Because again, I think the sectors are really divided, even though we want to work together. There isn't enough funding, resources, capacity, etc. And so after the 2 online sessions, we were then invited to go to Berlin together. There were, I think, about 15 of us from different sectors. And we all talked about methodologies and ways in which we could take this further. So then 4 of us, again, I'm one of the team. And I think, again, in socially engaged projects, it's really important to acknowledge everyone you speak to. You know, it's always nice not fair that just one person has the mic, and I hope I do it justice. But there's 4 of us. So there's an investigative journalist called Daniel Trilling. He's been reporting on migration over the last 10 years, and he normally writes for The Guardian. A filmmaker and an activist called Ashish Gadiali, and he always talks about racial justice, and that was really, really important. That was an angle that we really wanted to talk about. And a brilliant curator called Dominik Czakowski, who's Polish, based in London as well, and who sort of works on projects around migration through the lens of history. And so when the 4 of us started thinking, what is it that we, how do we bring these sectors together? I think what we were interested in 2 things. The first being that predictions for 2100, so in about 50 years' time, are that obviously the climate is going to be quite different from now. And if that really does happen, so if we actually hit 2.7 degrees of warmth, about 0.5% of 50% of the world will live in a different climate that's really not suitable for their own conditions, for like human conditions. And obviously migration will be very different. And so we were thinking, again, with this sort of lens of looking into the future, but really keeping an eye on the present, how can we use the lived experience of people who have migrated and who are migrating literally because of climate displacement? How could we use that lived experience to become expertise? And how can we actually kind of reframe, again, dismantle the stereotypes in the media, right? How can we empower these stories to become the story that actually completely change everything? And then the other thing that interested us is that, of course, climate refugees do not have status. And we know how horrible, how horrific the experiences of people who are seeking asylum are already with status. So we were wondering, again, how can we change these narratives? So we decided that instead of doing something new, which is really important, we are going to focus on things that are already happening on the ground. So we went to Palermo in Italy. One, because it's the hottest place in Europe. People are dying of heat, particularly people who are working in the agricultural sector. They've been dying for the last few years. Temperatures are around 48 degrees now in the summer. And also because it's obviously a place where it's a place of arrival in Europe, and we really wanted to speak to people and to see how we could put those experiences together. And then again, we wanted to meet people and to speak to organizations who are doing this work already. And so we were really, really fortunate to meet the Gambian and the Senegalese community. They really offer iftar into public space. This is something that really, really, really was really important for us, and the way in which people are claiming space into the cities. And again, how can we do this more? How can we claim more? And again, I think so they give out free food to everyone, not just to people from their own communities. They literally give people food to everyone, but with this idea that food is a pretext, and actually what happens is the political discussion when we share food together. And then we met with this incredible organization called Maldusa, which was literally founded on the day when we were there. They were having an opening party, so we ended up at their opening party. And their remit is to really facilitate the freedom of movement of people who are coming into Europe. And what's happening at the moment, the people who are piloting the boats, who are literally helping people from not drowning into the Mediterranean, are being criminalized. Because this is what's happening in Europe at the moment. And so again, going back to the climate crisis and the skills that we might be needing in the future, when the seas are rising, things are going really, really badly for everyone. How can we actually use the skills of the people who are piloting these boats and who are creating solidarity movements to applaud them and not to criminalize them? The other thing we did was we were really interested in the mainstream as well and what happens in the cultural sector. So we went to Teatro Massimo, which is the 3rd largest theater in Europe, incredible theater. And we spoke to this conductor. That's it on the screen. We spoke to a conductor of a choir of immigrant children. They've been working together for the last 5 years, and he talked to us about the changing of the demographics of the theater. The theater hosts, I think, about 2,000 seats every night. And so over the last 5 years, the demographic has changed. And so for us, it was really important to see if there's a way in which you could connect the grassroots movements with the larger which sort of the larger funded movement, so that again we could actually sort of impact more. And then we went away from Palermo, again promising that we're not going to do anything new. All we're going to do is respond to what we saw. So all of us, we just essentially wrote some pieces and created artworks in response to this. And you can see them downstairs in the exhibition. They're all sort of printed out. But Daniel, the journalist, really focused on, again, this idea of claiming public space and creating physical spaces for journalists to actually be there and to be with a community and not just parachute in. I focused on, this is us doing a really wonderful tour in the university. I focused on this idea of, again, solidarity skills and what does that mean and how do we use the mainstream sectors to sort of lift the grassroots movements and to fund them more and to really start democratizing access to those stages, essentially. And then Dominic made a really beautiful visual essay where he sort of in a pamphlet set way, he took loads of photographs of everything he was seeing, and then he sort of wrote down his interpretation of the history of migration in Palermo. And I think I'll leave it there. I presume I'm
you used the 5 minutes well, yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that and showing us your project.
Pleasure.
Is there anyone from the audience who would like to ask something or respond? No takers? Oh, wait. The camera is coming your way.
I'm Frans.
The microphone.
Utrecht. She showed a theater. Which theater was it?
Teatro Massimo. Teatro Massimo.
In which city?
Palermo.
Okay, thank you.
This was just a cultural request for personal reasons. Okay,
it's worth going, I have to say.
You said it was the third largest
in Europe.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Would anyone at the table like to respond? No? I have a question for you. I have a couple, actually.
Go for it.
So you were talking about how to use lived experience, right? So how can you incorporate this in all of your projects? So how do you do this in a respectful manner?
It's a very, very good question. I think you do it, and again, I think this is why we decided on this project. We're not creating anything. You know, we're not going to do anything new because there isn't enough time. I think respect comes with time. Respect comes with trust, with having meaningful relationships with people, and with really. I think it comes. I think you need to put yourself first of all in a position of humility and of understanding what's happening. And I think only once you've done that, once you've gained people's trust and you've been there and you've really, really listened with intent, you can actually start working with people. Yeah. So the solidarity skills that you were talking about are like the humility, the listening, the understanding, the waiting for someone to tell you what they need instead of filling it in for them. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, challenging power dynamics. You know, it's never about power over. Everyone has privilege, but some people have more privilege than others.
Yeah.
Right? So it's power with, right? How can we? And I think it's. What really makes sort of moves me every single time when I do this work is the inspiration you get from doing things with people. You know, doing things with people, and again breaking down the hierarchies which are so colonial. You know, and we're so used to them. I think we try to do them, but they're so ingrained in our educational systems, in our patriarchal systems, in our societies. So it's almost, the unlearning is very, very difficult, but it's incredible when you actually manage to have meaningful discussions with people.
Yeah. Can you think of an anecdote in which you had this kind of conversation with a person? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, for sure. I think in previous projects I've worked over 3 years. I worked with a group of incredible young men who arrived in London seeking asylum without parents. So they would have been between 14 and 16 at the time. And we decided to build a classroom together, and we built it over a year, just by hand, natural materials. And obviously that allowed us to have enough time to get to know each other, to do something physical together, but also to hear stories. And what came out of that was, again, through the listening experience, you learn about people's needs at that time, and also you see them develop. And I think for young people who I think if you meet them at 14 and then in 2 years' time, those needs changed. But I think what came out of that is that all of the young people we met, like one of them then decided that he really wanted to speak about these issues to the larger public. So then he ended up doing a speech in Trafalgar Square in London for the climate march to talk about the climate crisis and climate displacement. So I think, yeah, for me, it's about, again, deep listening and platforms and democratizing access to platforms and how do we do this in an equitable way. And it's brilliant to see someone at 18 who's now just doing their own thing, and they're probably going to run the next the next podcast, and which is brilliant. It's so amazing to see.
Yeah, using your own privileges and opportunities to help others who don't have it.
Yeah, and I think because we all have voice, right? We all have voice, but we don't have access to things. And I think access is the biggest challenge, right? How do we democratize that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking to this. We'll get back to you. And for now, I want to go to Lucia. Is it Lucia or Lucia?
Lucia.
Lucia. Okay, Lucia, Barcelona. You can hear it in the Lucia Mendoza Leiva. Thank you so much for joining us. So we were actually supposed to have Alejandra Ortiz here tonight, but she couldn't make it because she was sick, unfortunately. And luckily, Lucia was here because she already did a talk yesterday at the conference or at the assembly. So thank you for being here. And you also brought someone with you who is Beatriz Dodo. And she's going to be translating for you. So you understand English, but you don't feel completely comfortable speaking back in English. So she's going to speak back in English for you, and you're going to say it in Spanish.
Correcto.
Great. It's going to be super nice and dynamic. Yeah, so you work as a cultural manager at Periferia Cimarronas.
Yeah.
It's an organization that creates cultural programming about Blackness and anti-racism in Barcelona, correct?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell a little bit more about it, or should we start the presentation?
Well, I can start the presentation. Sí, ¿puedo
Sí.
empezar con la presentación?
Great.
Sí, bueno, como para hacer una introducción del trabajo que hago y que hago con las organizaciones. Me gustaría también decir que aquí estoy súper contenta de estar aquí y que gracias por la invitación y gracias por darme otra oportunidad para poder hablar de los proyectos en los que trabajo.
De nada.
So I am going to go into the different projects, cultural projects where I work. But first of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for giving me even a second chance to be able to share this project with you.
Bueno, una de las cosas que para mí eran importantes es hablar del racismo y del antirracismo de forma transversal, ¿no? Cómo el racismo ataca en todas las partes, ¿no?, de la sociedad, y cómo de alguna manera la cultura ha quedado relegada, ¿no?, o los derechos culturales de las personas migrantes han quedado relegadas a un segundo plano.
So something that was very important for me was to talk about racism and anti-racism and how this crosses absolutely every area, every field of our lives. And something that was also very important to talk about was how migrant communities' cultural right, their right to access to culture, has been always marginalized.
Hablar de la cultura ya no solamente como una forma de expresión, sino también como un derecho que tenemos todos y cada uno de nosotros, y que muchas veces para las personas migrantes nos ven como una cifra en el ámbito social, en políticas migratorias, pero no nos ven como sujetos que hacemos cultura y consumimos cultura.
So, a ver, ¿cómo has dicho al principio? Sorry, I'm not a professional translator, but I tried.
Doesn't show.
Cultura como derecho. ¿Y al principio qué has dicho de todo?
Que era importante no solo como una forma de expresión, sino por un derecho.
Sorry. So one thing that was important is to understand culture as not only a way to express ourselves, but a human right. And what happens often is that migrant communities, we are seen most of the times as a number in migration field, number in social field, but we're not seen as cultural subjects.
En Barcelona somos el 30% de las personas que habitamos en la ciudad somos migrantes, y esto no está absolutamente reflejado en los programas culturales de la ciudad, en absoluto. Y una de mis preocupaciones es estudiar y analizar para que haya políticas públicas que sean representativas de la diversidad cultural que hay en la ciudad, ya no solamente a nivel artístico, sino también de cultura popular.
So 30% of the population living in Barcelona, we are migrant, 30% of us, but this diversity does not reflect in culture when it comes to art in different expressions. This diversity does not show. So one of my main concerns is to be able to put together data and information to be able to create policies that will guarantee this right to culture.
Decirle a la sociedad, ¿no?, que vivimos en un territorio, muchas culturas que tienen que estar presentes en esos programas públicos que además están pagados con nuestros impuestos, ¿no?, y que de alguna manera no nos están devolviendo.
Also to make people notice that we live in this society that has this cultural equipments, I would say pieces, work, art, and we are part of this society. We do also pay for this culture because our taxes are in there, but then we are not represented and we don't have access to it.
Y si lo estamos de forma completamente estereotipada, no nos representa en absoluto.
And when we are in this culture, when we are included, it's in a stereotypical way where we don't feel absolutely anyhow represented.
Y esto también tiene que ver con las formas en que se toman las decisiones y no estamos en la toma de decisiones de los programas culturales.
And this also has to do with how decisions are made, because we are not in the power spaces where these decisions are made. That's why.
Y bueno, y con esta inquietud y con este trabajo de fondo más teórico.
So with this concern I had, and this after doing this theoretical work, political work to get all of this information,
empecé a colaborar con Periferia Cimarronas, que es un pequeño espacio cultural dedicado a las artes escénicas en la ciudad, que empezó hace muy poquito, hace un año.
So with all this knowledge, I started to work with Periferia Cimarronas, which is a little cultural project that was born not too long ago, like a short time ago. And basically it's a space where it's a house for scenic art.
Y fue una alternativa, al final es una alternativa a la escasez de oferta cultural que realmente nos represente. Y las compañeras que lo crearon fue Silvia Albert, Karel Mena y Elizabeth.
So Periferia was created as an alternative because since we don't have the spaces, we needed to create an alternative. And
Sí, creado por...
Okay, of course. And it was created by 3 Afro-descendant women, which are Silvia Albert, she's the one in black and white in the picture on the left. I think you can see her. Also, Karel. Say the names, yeah. You say them, los nombres.
Yeah, Karel Mena, Silvia Albert, and Elizabeth Flor de Tamarindo.
Those 3 women.
Es un espacio al final de creación, de experimentación y también de exhibición de artes escénicas que no solamente hablan de nuestro recorrido migratorio o de nuestra experiencia como personas migrantes, sino como personas.
So it's a space to create. It's a space, an artistic, creative space, and it don't only talk about our experiences and our life stories as migrant community, but just as persons, like people.
Vale, y bueno, al final se ha creado un espacio de sanación, de encuentro entre personas racializadas que aman la cultura y que adoran las artes escénicas y que de alguna manera no tenían espacio donde encontrarse y hablar de teatro o encontrarse y hablar de arte, ¿no? Entonces allí vemos algunas fotos.
So it has somehow become a space that the migrant community that we love and we adore culture and scenic art, we have this place to heal together, to cure, and to have this space to talk about the issues where we usually don't have safe spaces to talk about.
En las fotos que vemos, bueno, aquí es a la salida de una de las obras de teatro de India y bueno, ahí se ve como la alegría, ¿no?, de encontrarnos en un espacio como ese.
So the picture on the left it was right after a theater play from India, you said?
India.
The artist was India. And I think looking at the picture, you can see the joy and the happiness of coming together in such an amazing space.
Y la otra foto es en un taller que hicimos, porque no solamente se exhibe o se crea en ese espacio, sino también generamos espacios de sanación, de encuentro para hablar de nuestras cosas, y en este taller hablamos de esperanza, como el concepto de esperanza radical, y fue muy, muy, muy bonito. Y el taller fue creado por Cristina Cárdenas.
Also, the picture in the middle, the center, this was a workshop we did based on esperanza, which is a very beautiful word in Spanish. It means hope. So it was created by Cristina Cárdenas. She's such a great professional. She's a therapist. And the idea is radical hope. So hope as a way, an engine to keep moving on. And as we were saying, it's like a space where we gather and we heal and we get to talk about our issues somehow.
Y a la vez nos gusta pensar en estos espacios creados por nosotros y para nosotros, que son muy necesarios y son de primeras, son unos espacios seguros, ¿no?, donde no vamos a, de alguna manera, no vamos a sentirnos violentados, ¿no? Sí.
And somehow it makes us very happy to know that we have this kind of spaces that we created for us, for our communities, and we know that there are safe spaces and we're not going to experience any type of violence or any type of bad situations.
También nos gusta pensar que hay espacios en la ciudad, muchos espacios culturales en la ciudad, que no tenemos lugar en ellos. Entonces, aparte de estos espacios que nosotros creamos, de alguna manera reclamamos ese espacio en todos esos centros culturales, porque al final los recursos están allí, ¿no? Y tenemos que siempre crear nuestros espacios de forma precarizada y no es justo.
And somehow we also think how there are different equipments, different spaces, cultural spaces in the city, but since we don't have access to them, it makes us happy to look at projects like this, because we are so used to creating precariated projects when it comes to migrant communities, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the money. So somehow it makes us very proud to look at projects like this and know that we have like a space for us.
O sea, que defendemos los dos modelos, en la parte privada donde creamos nosotros los mismos espacios y reclamar esos espacios que también nos desprenden. O sea, una cosa no quitaba de otra.
So we claim the two models, I would say, the two types of perspective. So on one hand, like having the private space, the one of our own, the one we created, but also on the other hand, claiming and fighting to be present in the other space, because it's also the other public cultural spaces, because it's also our right as citizens that we are.
Y voy a explicar también otro proyecto en el que trabajé. En la siguiente diapositiva, sí, es el ciclo de cultura antirracista. Es cuando estaba viviendo en Madrid y lo hicimos con SOS Racismo Madrid. Y fue unas jornadas culturales que englobaban teatro, música, danza, y de alguna manera aquí lo que quisimos es poner el valor del trabajo de los artistas, no solo como una expresión que era para nosotros muy necesario, sino como reclamo a las salas culturales, a las salas de teatro o de música, que paguen por ello y se hagan cargo de los recursos.
So this is another project I would like to talk about. This is the anti-racist culture circle, which were like it was like an event we did in Madrid in different days, and the main purpose, the main goal was to recognize the value in migrant creators, migrant artists, but also at the same time to somehow reach to the cultural equipments in the city and tell them, hey, we're here and our culture is also has a big value, so pay for it, give us also the resources.
Sí, y lo que hicimos no es lo que solemos hacer, que es cuando queremos hacer un evento cultural, es llamar a todos los artistas que conocemos para que nos hagan favores y nos hagan el trabajo gratis. Y esto no lo podemos permitir más. Entonces lo que hicimos fue hacer una lista de todos los espacios culturales de Madrid y enviarles una propuesta. Bueno, varias propuestas para que ellos elijan. Entonces, de alguna manera, ellos estaban, si se decían antirracistas, porque eran espacios que se decían antirracistas, tenían que elegir una propuesta para integrar en su programación durante los días que nosotros les dábamos de festival.
So what we did is that we changed a little bit what we used to do, because usually when it comes to migrant communities organizing this type of artistic events, we just call our colleagues, hey, there's no money, there's no resources, so just do it for the cause, do it as a favor. But this time we wanted to do something different. We wanted to involve the different cultural spaces in the city. So what we did is like we did a big list with different like artworks and artists and shows and plays and poems and theater, music artists, etc. And since those spaces were self-claimed anti-racist spaces, we went there and we said, okay, cool, you're so anti-racist, so here is the list. Choose one of these anti-racist shows and include them in your space, put them in your list as well.
De esta lista tan larga de espacios, al final solo aceptaron 3.
So, okay. So we offered a long list, and at the end of the day, they only accepted 3.
Pero fue un balance de alguna manera perfecto, porque pudimos también trabajar con espacios hermanos, que eran la parcería. En ese momento no estaba Espacio Afro, pero fue muy bonito encontrarnos también en esos espacios migrantes que acababan de empezar además.
So we actually only got 3 of these artists selected for the anti-racist spaces, but somehow it was very, very revealing, because we got to know which spaces were actually sister and brother spaces. So we got to connect with these spaces that were like just starting as well. There's a space, for example, called La Parceria, which is a very beautiful place where they do like all kind of artistic expression and workshops. And it was starting. So with this festival, we got the opportunity to connect with them and see who really is there so we can build with them.
Y teníamos esas 2 opciones, espacios donde puede que no seamos tan seguros, pero no se estaban poniendo los recursos, pero teníamos también ese espacio seguro donde sí que podíamos ser.
So we had 2 options. We had those spaces that maybe we didn't feel that comfortable there, but it was good because they were putting the resources and they were like giving us the
artist.
The artist could access there, you mean? See? Okay. So we had like this option where maybe not that safe and that comfortable spaces, but at least we get our artists to be there and perform there. And then we also had our like own space where we got the chance to just be ourselves.
Y como para finalizar, me gustaría explicaros un último proyecto muy rápido.
So the last vale. Okay, we're going to explain very, very, very fast the last project.
Sí, y después del ciclo de cultura antirracista surgió este proyecto que, bueno, ya había surgido, pero se alimentó este proyecto que pone en contacto a muchos artistas migrantes y racializados de España. Es un mapa que nos sitúa a todos en un espacio virtual y podemos encontrarnos.
So after the festival, the previous project we were talking about, this happened. Well, it started before, but after it really materialized, it's a map that connects artists and people involved in the cultural industry from all over Spain. It started in Madrid, but then it got liked in other cities in Spain. And it's like this huge platform, and it's great because we've been able to connect a lot of people.
Sí, yo no estaba involucrada directamente en este proyecto, pero hemos tenido muchísimas conversaciones sobre políticas culturales y derechos culturales con Mari, y ella fue la que creó este mapa, que al final ha sido un recurso importantísimo para gestores culturales, artistas y trabajadores de la cultura, que nos ha hecho conectar, porque muchas veces dentro de la cultura estamos cerrados mirando lo que nosotros hacemos, y sobre todo las personas migrantes. No sé qué pasa, que no nos veíamos, ¿no? Y con esto ha sido magnífico.
So I was not participating directly in this project, but I had a lot of conversations with, ¿cómo se llamaba? Perdón. With Damari, who created it, and it has become a very important tool and platform for me and for, I would say, all the migrant members in Spain that we're working in the cultural industry, because sometimes it happens that we don't see ourselves, sometimes, especially the migrant gestores culturales, ¿cómo era? Cultural managers. Sometimes it's like we don't see each other because we're like so focused on doing our own thing that we fall in this loneliness and we don't see each other. So this has been a great tool to connect, and it has been wonderful.
Y ya para terminar, me gustaría decir que ojalá en este evento, con los proyectos maravillosos que hay, podamos crear también esas alianzas que nos ayuden a cambiar las narrativas sobre las personas migrantes y racializadas.
And just to finish, I wish with the amazing projects that are here today and are here these days that we have the chance to connect and to build these alliances that will help to change the narratives and the perspective about migrant communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much for showing us your project. Yeah, that deserves an applause. Is there anyone with a very quick question? We're also going to do a question round afterwards, after we hear the third presentation. Anyone from the audience? Anyone at the table?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. Really amazing projects. What I was thinking the entire time is, how can we make projects like this more scalable and more present in more places? You mentioned that you did a lot of work when it comes to policies, a lot of political work. Can you give some examples that actually helped you drive most change in order to create these projects?
Sí. Sí, los cambios principalmente, o sea, tenemos que organizarnos. Hasta hace un año, las trabajadoras de la cultura no estábamos tan organizadas como lo estábamos ahora, hace un año y un poco más quizá. Pero ahora hay un tejido cultural migrante importante que está haciendo estas demandas a las instituciones. Está interviniendo en los planes de derechos culturales de la ciudad, y lo que prima es la organización, porque solas no podemos.
So I would say that when it comes to building this kind of work, the most important thing is to be organized. Like a year ago, or maybe a year and a little bit more ago, the cultural workers, migrant cultural workers, we were not organized. We didn't even know each other. But now, a year later, we are organized. We are pushing in the institutions. We are fighting for our rights. We are collaborating in plans, in policies that are being written to guarantee cultural access and as a human right. So I would say, I hope I'm translating everything right. So I would say, like, the base of everything is to be organized, because we cannot do it alone. So it all comes down to organizing.
Yeah, thank you for your question and for your answer. Now I propose we go to Ariam Tekle. Welcome. Thank you for being here. You came all the way from Italy, and you're gonna go back very soon, tomorrow morning, I think, to tell us about your podcast. You're a podcaster. You specifically don't want to be called a journalist, which I have a question about later. But you're a podcaster. It's called Black Coffee, and you also organize a festival, which is called Blackness Fest in Italy. And you're gonna tell us about it.
I'm gonna start thanking you for inviting me, and I'm starting also with apologizing for my English. So yeah, I'm the co-founder of Black Coffee Podcast. Me and my colleague Emmanuel Maréchal, that unfortunately couldn't be here today. We met 3 years ago because she wanted to interview me for another project, a documentary, and we were chatting in front of a coffee and in a public space.
Italian.
Yeah. Real coffee. Sorry. And so we started talking, but because my documentary was about Eritrean second generation in Italy, born and raised in the 70s and the 80s. So of course we talk about citizenship, blackness, and all topics related. And for the first time for each other was like we felt very comfortable talking about these topics, and we didn't feel the fear to be misunderstood, and also we didn't care about if other people were listening, and we didn't care about their reaction. So at the end of this interview conversation, we started thinking that it was important to public this type of conversation and to include other voices. So we started the podcast. Now it's an archive of 100 episodes where we interview, like I say interview, but it's more like a chat with other Afro-descent people or racialized people in Italy. And we talk about several topics like mental health, racial profiling, and or just their job or their skills or the art. And it was important for us because we realized that mainstream media usually when they tell our story, they shape our stories. They change them to be more acceptable for the audience. And but for us it's important to it was important to show the complexity. Sometimes I invent words. Help me, please. So it was so important to show all the path of a person, and then we realized that also the people we were contacting were very happy to be free, and we called our podcast the Italian podcast without filters, and without white filter actually. Yeah, and then during this experience, something happened in 2021 in Italy in the TV public TV, state TV. They use a very racist word again, and so it became like a viral this moment, and we met other activists, black activists or racialized activists. We demonstrate in front of the sede, I don't know, the office of this TV. Okay, and sorry,
at the broadcasting station. You went there, yeah.
And then we start like meetings between us, confronting, debating, and then I realized that it was important to to do this kind of this conversation in an intimate space,
Circle, yeah.
but at the same time it was important to do public. So we started thinking how we could do that. In the same period, a lot of things happened, and we were invited also in other cultural event. And as you mentioned before, often also in Italy, they don't pay you. They just invite you and they say that they give you visibility and a platform and and we were very tired of that. So that's why we thought that it was a festival. Blackness was a possibility to change this kind of approach and to create an alternative and where people could talk about very sensitive topics, but in a safe space. But I really don't believe in safe in safe spaces, but we try. So everyone can join and listen, but all the people we invite to talk are racialized or black or in general racialized people. And we talk about art, music, the topic I mentioned before, so mental health, racial profile, and the effect of racial profile on mental health, and representation. Representation is a very important topic because, as both of you mentioned before, marginalized people in general are very stereotyped. But the thing is that in Italy, what is happening, it's in the negative way, but also in the positive way. And also the positive way is dangerous because we talk about black excellence. And if you take just one successful story to represent a big community, communities actually, because it's not just one community, are many, it's a problem. So the festival gives us the opportunity to take to listen a personal story, individual story, not representing all the category, but it helps us also to retrace the common point to see how our society is structured and which discrimination are we living the same. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're doing great.
About the blackness, I have a video, a trailer. So if
let's watch it.
Yeah.
Secondo me il razzismo scollegato da un ragionamento di classe è semplicemente masturbazione per liberare.
A questo punto dobbiamo iniziare ad attenzionare la salute mentale per davvero e non per mantra.
Sempre a partire da una questione di genere e di violenza di genere è necessario e fondamentale riflettere internamente anche a certe realtà.
Cresceremo ancora di più, che lo vogliate o no, perché è così. Questo.
So there are other videos of the last edition on our social media, Blackness Fest, and the point, one of the main fundamental thing is the class, because every time we hear about a conversation about racism, anti-racism practice, very often they exclude the class, and this is like a kind of it became like a kind of.
You mean the social class, right? The socioeconomic class.
Yes, and it's fundamental to take into account when we talk about racism, because it's a system. It's not. Sometimes we make confusion between discrimination and other things, and racism, because the racism is a system. And so if you take off this part, it's just discrimination, and it's just what we saw also, I think, in all Europe, brands and other big company that using these anti-racism slogans, but actually they are perpetrate in their company, internal in their company, the same practices. And yeah, I think I'm lost, but
no, I think what you're telling is really, maybe does anyone have a question? No, let's first have a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for talking to us about this. Does anyone have a question?
You had a question.
I did, but you're first. Do you have a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay, the mic is coming your way. Right next.
So I'm very interested in Ariam's story of the podcast and how you were able to set up this, because you said you're not a journalist, you don't call yourself that, but then you're making media, and that brings with it, this, that you bring this voice of, racism. You cannot analyze it without class. It's very important. Thank you for that. And how do you find your audience in that sense of the people that are interested in this podcast and are thinking the same thing, and how do you influence them? How was that process for you guys as the podcast?
Okay, I'm not a journalist, but I have this kind of approach because I had the opportunity to study sociology. So I in my studies, I always had this kind of qualitative interview, and then I decided to realize a documentary because in around 2010 and 12 in Italy there were a campaign to reform the citizenship law, but I found it I found it very problematic because they were like stressing the idea that if you were born in Italy, your identity is Italian. So if your identity is Italian, also your nationality should be Italian. But it was very dangerous because so-called second generation migrants maybe have multiple identity, or maybe they don't recognize the Italian identity as so. And that's why and also another thing that they were used to do was like also talking about a new generation, like 18 years old people, like even like there were other generation before them. There were my parents came in Italy in the 70s. My sister was born in the 80s. But in 2012, they were talking about new generations, so something didn't match. And that's why I decided to do this documentary. And so I was like trained in the interviewing, and also my colleague she already had a podcast for herself. So yeah, we have this tool, and we knew how more or less approach the people. And about the audience, I think that in 2020 it was very new, the content, because they were after George Floyd murder on May, a lot of black people gathered and connected, and a lot of projects born after that. But before that, we were not very connected. So a content like Black Coffee was very fresh, very new, and it was not easy to reach the attention. Also because we think that if you are black or if you are racialized, you are sensitive in this topic, but it's not that simple. And we have I have an approach very direct. So if I maybe here it's more common, but in Italy, if you say like a white person, they say like, why you are why you need to precise that, like something like that. So at the beginning,
threatened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the beginning was very hard, but now I think that we have also a lot of projects that have the same approach, and it's important because we don't need to be the only one. We need to be more and create more projects and include more voices. So, and the same for the Blackness Fest. I always say that we won't be the unique. We want to inspire others to do the same in Milan or in other part of Italy, and educate ourselves to demand a salary when we contribute with the content, cultural content, and artistic content, whatever.
Yeah. Thank you. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Sure.
I'd like to, because we have about 5 to 10 minutes left, so I'd like to start the roundtable talk. And I think, Dana, I wanted to start with you because you're sitting at the table with a podcaster and an activist / cultural worker. And I think you're also an activist. I think we're all kind of activists at the table, to be honest. Is there anything that you'd like to pick their brain about, also in the context of the toolbox, when you hear these stories?
I feel like I need 10 seconds to think about it.
Okay,
Really
think about that. I'll come back to you. In the meantime, I'd like to ask the other way around the question. So, how do you think, Lucia, but also Ariam, Dana's toolkit can help you kind of cross sectors within your own context? Do you think it could help you out?
Sí, de algún modo las herramientas que ella ha presentado. Sorry, when you say the toolcase, you mean
the toolkit?
Toolkit.
Yeah, maybe you can give a 10-word rundown of.
Please.
I think that's fair. So I guess the toolkit contains responses from journalists, from socially engaged artists, from academics, from cultural workers, from podcast hosts, about their role in the sector and how they can create solidarity in the sector as well. So it's a collection of interviews, it's a collection of articles, it's a collection of images. So some of them you can see downstairs, and I think this is why it's a bit abstract, right? Because you haven't seen the toolkit. But I guess really what it tries to encapsulate is that solidarity needs to exist in the sector, because otherwise they're all atomized. They just live independently. So how can we help each other more? How can we create this solidarity, I suppose?
Yeah.
Sí. Sí. La pregunta era que si este proyecto nos ayuda, ¿verdad?
Sí, si podemos como tomar referencia de las herramientas que ella explica, como aplicarlo en nuestros sectores, ¿no? En tu caso, en la cultura.
Sí, es totalmente aplicable. O sea, quisiera tenerlo ya delante para poder investigar sobre eso. Y además creo que en muchos países como este, creo que hay muchísimos avances, y estarás muy de acuerdo conmigo, ¿no? Que me da la sensación de que hay muchos más recursos para proyectos migrantes y racializados, hay más espacios, aunque hay muchísimo trabajo que hacer. Creo que en España nos queda aún más trabajo y cualquier proyecto que estemos viendo por aquí va a ser súper inspirador.
So definitely, I feel like the toolkit is something very inspiring, and I would actually like to have it here in front of me so I would be able to apply it to see how to really work with it. And the thing is, I have the feeling that when it comes to countries like this, the city that we are in, Amsterdam, we have the feeling, and maybe you maybe agree with this, I have the feeling that there are like more resources, and when it comes to migrant projects, like they're more advanced, more developed than in Spain or in Italy, where it's like super hard to try to create this type of project, and especially get resources.
Y no solamente recursos, sino también el nivel de conciencia.
And not only resources, but also the level of consciousness.
Would anyone in the audience like to respond to that from their own experience or something that they've seen? Can someone compare these perspectives who is familiar with the Spanish context and the Dutch context? No. Okay, then we'll owe you the answer to that. Yeah. You would also like to respond?
Yeah, the question. Yeah, I think that it's very important what the toolkit, and because as she mentioned, we're living in a society where they push you to be competitive and not like working together. You need to get the resources. There are very few, and so the first who arrive is so yeah, it's fundamental, and that's what we want to create with the Black Coffee and Blackness, an alternative to this approach that. And it's utopistic, I don't know, but we are trying in a small dimension. But that's what the message that we want to share.
Yeah. Did you think of something?
I did. And I think it's no. I just think, I mean, hearing from both of you is so relevant, particularly I think in the context of different countries and how this sort of applies to different countries. I think again because I'm Romanian, so I grew up in a country that was not. I lived most of my life being non-EU. Then Romania got into the EU. Then you're EU. Then you move to the UK. You're a bit EU, and then they vote Brexit, and you're back to non-EU. So there's just been this cycle of just like. You just don't really understand what's happening, you know. And then you think, have I caused this? You know, wherever I go, this conservative governments, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But the funding landscape, which I think, again, connects what you've both said, is really, really important because the difference between the West and the rest of the world is that money is distributed in a very bizarre way. So since BLM in the UK, money is thrown at projects which are run by people of color, but they're not thrown in a meaningful way. You know, they're not thrown with values and with ethics. They're a bit like, please, our white guild, just have some money. And then you move, and then, you know, when we went to Palermo now, and you see that actually bureaucracy is really difficult in Italy, right? It's really, really difficult to get things started. But because of it, you actually can do a lot of grassroots projects, and you can get away with doing loads of things without that kind of box ticking, kind of very, very Western model of we're taking everything. And so for me, it's really important. How do you negotiate that? You know, how can you keep your values and the ethics and work at the scale that you want to? It may be smaller, it may be bigger. And also, how can you have the conversation so that this does influence the mainstream, so that it doesn't just stay at the grassroots level, unless you really want it to stay there, which is really important. But how do you really affect the mainstream media to stop being so white, essentially?
A mí me gustaría decir una cosa, es que en Barcelona todo el trabajo que que se está haciendo a nivel político es porque ya ahora mismo hay personas racializadas que están en las instituciones y que están poniendo el cuerpo y todo el conocimiento con el apoyo nuestro que están detrás, ¿no? Ya abriendo esa puerta, ¿no? Y creo que son muy importantes estas alianzas, tanto a nivel político, a nivel social, para no solamente acceder a esos recursos, sino para nosotras acceder a esos espacios, para que nosotras en un futuro podamos decidir también.
So now in Barcelona, all of the cultural policies that are happening, and since they have this migrant perspective, is because there is racialized persons, just a few of them, not many, in the institutions already, who are putting their bodies and their knowledge and their strength. And also they have the support, our support, that we stand behind them, but we still help them, we push them somehow. So I think it's very important to build this kind of alliances, this kind of collaborations, because it's the way to claim for our right to be there and to claim for our right to have those resources as well.
Not only the resources, we as professionals been there.
Bueno, yes,
yeah.
That was English. Yeah. I was going to translate English.
We knew, yes. Thank you for speaking to that. I saw one last question in the audience over there, and you raised your hand, no? Yes, waiting for the microphone. Is it a short question?
Well, actually, it's not a question. I'm Annette from Amsterdam, and I just wanted to say something short about the Amsterdam context, or the Dutch context. In Amsterdam, we have a lot of solidarity, but there also means that there are a lot of organizations and artists involved. And I think the challenge in Amsterdam is really to find each other and, you know, build up the solidarity together. That's my remark.
Thank you for that remark. I think it's a really important one. I'm afraid we have to wrap this up. I want to thank you all very much for being here tonight and sharing your expertise and your experiences with us. I hope these 2 days will lead to like further alliances. I've heard this word a lot at the table, and I really hope you can find ways to work together and work across borders, cross sector, because that's really important. The program will now continue in the Grote Zaal with a promising meme battle, something of with a bit of a different energy. Also, don't forget to pass by the showcase downstairs that you were talking about, as well. It's really nice to see and have some visuals as well. You can also take a look at all the videos that were produced by the guests today in the building and see the artwork that inspired the whole project. So thank you so much also for being here in the audience. Have a good night. Have fun.
Thank you.